I'm Joshua, and I'm an INTP, and first and foremost, I would like to say thank you for viewing this video, and subsequently visiting my channel. Excuse me. I've been on a rather long hiatus due to work and school and all other assortment of responsibilities. I've been constantly putting more and more social expectative loads on myself in terms of trying to become more responsible as an individual and more established out within the economic community of America. And so pursuing job opportunities and trying to establish more academic pursuits has really been consuming much of my time, as well as personal relationships and trying to be more available and accessible to people, not only in my personal life, but also within the YouTube community. And so I apologize to those who I've started email dialogues with, but have not had the chance to really respond in kind within a reasonable timeline, or maybe so much more so a preferable timeline in expediency. So with all that said, I'd like to make this video because I think it's something that most potentially other types outside of NPs could use, but I know particularly for NPs, especially INTPs, that a serious struggle and burden is motivation. And I experienced this so very often, and it's taken me quite some time necessarily to work out methods and systems that I can use to make it so that the whole ebb and flow of sometimes being possessed by the intellectual and ingenuity goals, being able to deal with the whole item of that thing pushing me towards something, but then quickly subsiding, or becoming very excited about a potential possibility that I can associate with the future, and then going to pursue that thing, but then realizing it's a very large task and seems near insurmountable. I mean, if you look in my Google Drives, it is the land of unfinished academic writing. It's the land of unfinished philosophical works. I have a tremendous time trying to finish what it is I start, and I have a tremendous time trying to sustain motivation throughout an academic semester, particularly with workload. How is it that one can keep motivation going even though they're might be a bit resentful of the amount of task and the amount of barriers that they have to overcome? I know this is something that's the case for me oftentimes. So the first thing, I think, I can only speak from my perspective as somebody who deals with extroverted intuition, in the sense that I drink novelty out of an experience. So I'm most engaged whenever something is interesting. And what makes something interesting is that it's rather complex, surprising, and novel. If it's complex enough, surprising, and accurate, well, that's TI's criterion. If it's complex enough in terms of the information or the story or whatever, it's complex enough if it's surprising in the sense that I haven't seen many things like it, so it's eye-catching or attention catching, and it's novel, meaning it's new. So a lot of times people think that surprising and new are necessarily the same things, but from my perceptual landscape, they're not necessarily the same thing. Something can be surprising and not new, but when something is surprising and new and complex, those are the sufficient criteria to get me to be interested in it and pay attention to it. And so that's something in the world, and that's typically how my extroverted intuition directs me. Now, with my own personal projects or deadlines I'm given at work or school assignments, it's the thing that can motivate me to do a task is personal ingenuity. Is there any way I can use what I already know in such a manner that I can be somewhat creative and it be a thing that other people could get behind, appreciate, and use? Those are the items that get me to do something like that. But novelty is also associated with that because of, I think, because of extroverted intuition. Because if I have to do the same task over and over again, to hell with if another person appreciates it, I'm going to disdain it after a while because I like some flux, chaos, and change within my world. Maybe not as much chaos as a dominant extroverted intuitive type or a dominant extroverted sensing type may like, but I need some of that to make it so that I'm sufficiently stirred and engaged. But the issue is so much of the world is not like that, and so much of your life demands you to do seemingly menial and repetitive tasks over and over and over again. The problem with the whole complex of that is that the individual who's pretty open, who likes novelty, does not see the bare bones necessity of having these things, and because they're little items that keep the whole ship running. If I can use an military analogy, you need all of the members and the mast and the other aspects of the naval battleship to make sure it can stay afloat on the sea. But to the highly open, creative individual, those things seem rather worthless because a lot of times you don't have regular sleep patterns. I find myself staying up maybe at 12 and 2 a.m. on random nights. I mean, it's not very well predictable. I find myself rarely waking up at the same time if I don't have to be at work or if I don't have to be at school. I mean, it's damn near impossible for me to synchronize myself. I find that I don't want to do the same things oftentimes. I mean, maybe I don't finish an assignment, but if I've sat through lecture and understood it and I know that I get it, I'm not really going to want to sit down and do the homework to earn a grade, because what a teacher thinks is that I'm doing the homework to demonstrate that I have the knowledge. No, I think that's what the quiz and the test is for, but the homework, if I'm being graded on it, to me, that's just busy work. That's just a damn grade. I don't really want to do that. I mean, I kind of don't want to take the test either, but I know, hell, at least the test is necessary. And so it's so much so that it's just the way that if you're creative in things or you're open, you're somebody who is prone to novelty. It makes it rather hard to sustain your existence. Even for the mere fact, I don't eat very often. I don't eat a lot. And that's because I wake up, I'm into something new, I'm reading something, or I'm working on something new, not usually finishing the thing I've started. And I go from commitment to commitment to commitment. And so I go without taking very good care of myself. And I make it such that if my motivation is like an energy gauge, I'm shrinking it and causing it to dwindle down increasingly just by my own patterns and habits. And I'm not an idiot. I mean, I can pick out my patterns and I can pick out my habits, and I know damn well what I'm doing that's sort of corrupting the whole edifice of the efforts I push towards. But hell, I can never stop being open. And I'm in the 99th percentile for openness, for the trait of openness to experience. You probably will not find somebody who is more prone to tossing what they know out the window for something new, other than myself, besides myself, excuse me. And you'll only find a handful of individuals, I should say, that are more prone to do that than myself. Like, I'd move cities all the time if I could. It's just expensive to do so. Like, there is economic and there's rather fiscal and social constraints that keep me from flying completely off the handles in most instances. In most instances, but it's not the case that those same proclivities don't show up in the realm of responsibility. And I bring this up because this is the main factor, I think, which kills motivation. You, if you're somebody like me who's open about the only thing that can motivate you really is a sufficient novel challenge. I mean, maybe if you're also very big into ideas and you're slightly industrious, you're like this. Yet nothing interests you and engages you if it's not novel and if it's not sufficiently challenging. And guess what? That's not how the world actually is in a lot of ways. And that becomes a burden to carry around. Your own self honestly becomes a burden to carry around because you disappoint people, you squander opportunities, you don't trust yourself a lot of times. Like, the way introverted sensing may show up in your world if you're an INTP and you're like me is it just reminds you of remember the time you tried that before and you didn't finish, or remember the time you did that before and you completely failed. So you're not really up to the gun of shooting another shot at it. You're just like, to hell with that, too much energy. I could find other things to do with my time because you're fairly good at coming up with new things to do. But sticking to something and sticking with something, like, holy shit, that's a foreign language. Or it can be at times. And so what do you do if it's like this? Because, quite frankly, the modern world calls an individual to be conscientious enough to be reliable to a certain extent. And there's variability within situations and fields, but yeah, you need it nonetheless, because, I mean, hell, even Einstein had to work at a patent office for quite a while before he was heralded as the supreme genius that he is. So you gotta have some life skills, basically, to be able to do these sorts of things. So what are some things that I've certainly figured out, and what are some things that I still use, and I have to remind myself to continue to use them because I don't like systems. Inherently, I don't like external systems, like, sort of imposing their structure on me to get me moving, but I'm honestly ineffectual if it's not there, because I think if you're like me and you're fairly bright and you're highly creative, you know that you have a misplaced kind of trust. It's not that you think that, I mean, it's not that you're arrogant, it's more so that you've seen yourself do and pull off things within a short time frame that you're pretty confident in your ability to do so. Like, you know, if push came to shove, you could really come up with something. But the problem is, it depends on what the thing is and what the workload is, because you'll also get into the habit of thinking you can do that with a multitude of tasks. Maybe if it's one singular task and a one-time sort of thing, you can use that really vast creative output and spark of brilliance to get your way out of a jam. But when you have it such that you've been procrastinating and you're 6 or 7 assignments behind in your homework, no spark of brilliance is going to make it so that you can run through all 7 of those papers. It's not, because that's a battle of attrition, and it's something of endurance, and it's something of conscientiousness. I mean, it's consistent and prolonged work over time. It's not something that can be done in a sprint. I mean, unless you're like an autistic savant or something, and then it even depends. Like, it honestly depends. I mean, so the point is, you're probably not very good at being consistent. At least I know I'm not. Like, hell no, I'm not. Even in making videos, it's really damn hard, because I mean, I don't like to be shackled down, But you know what? The first thing you can realize and understand is the healthy habits are the habits that make it such that you can have the most maximum outputs. If you're like me and you care about your productivity, which to most people's surprise is INTPs do care about what they do. Maybe they don't want to do everything, but if they do something, if they do something that they want to do or they're interested in, they very much care about the outcome. They very much care about what they produce, and they don't like to produce, they don't like to produce anything that they would not find sufficient. And most INTPs have fairly high standards for the things that they care about and they're concerned with. Not with everything, but with those things, yes. And so the incorporation of just small habits and systems make it such that you can do work and you can have your life be something that's stable enough so that the good chaos can come and be a part of it. Because if you're like me, you know chaos all too well. You know the good chaos, or like the pragmatic, and I would say useful chaos, like that. You know that chaos, but then you know also the deleterious and malevolent kind of chaos, such that you get a ticket in the mail, or you forget to update the tags of your car, and then you go and park, and hello, you got a ticket on your window, and you forget to put it in your Google Calendar that you have to show up to court, and now you have to pay a very large fine, or they suspend your license. This has happened to me not once, but twice. So, I know it. I know it very well. But it's freaking unhelpful. As difficult as it is to pin yourself in and be bored in some immediate situations, because boredom is the first and only God-honest sin to me in my world. I hate to be bored for anything. I hate to be bored, and I hate to be controlled. Like, those are two things I hate. And if that's the case, you will find that your aversion to boredom limits your freedoms, and your inability to be consistent in some manners brings down your health and your well-being to if it lasts long enough. If you're as bad as me, if it lasts long enough to such a degree that it makes it such that you can't honestly get excited or be interested in things after a certain point. It's a very ugly spiral and circle. And so the things that I found is, one, routine. Learn it and adopt one. Adopt one that's coherent and easy enough. So if you're going to make a routine, make it easy. And make the routine be predicated on the things that you know you do not care about whatsoever. Because you have to make peace with the devil. That's just the simplest way to put it. If you don't like filing your taxes, then you should find some tax person that you should find somebody, or hire somebody, or find some website that makes it really easy for you to do it. You pick a date, and you do it on that day, every day of the year. That's it. At a specific time, and that's all you're going to do. You're not going to change it up a little. You're not going to dance around it. Just find something, pick it, and stick with it. And once you do it a few times, it becomes easier to keep up. That's something that, taxes are usually only once a year if you pay taxes. But, once you have one tax person, you do it for about 3 years, you just get used to, you go at this time of year and you file with this person, and you bring them a donut every now and then. It's that, that's what you do. And it makes it so that the IRS doesn't want to beat down your door. you're not going to be very brilliant in jail. I mean, you might be, but you might be Ted Kaczynski at that point. You know, but it's like that's how you have to do your morning routines. And I mean, doing the same thing over and over again in certain contexts, that is just completely debilitating. But in other contexts, it's completely necessary because it's useful. I mean, not changing something all the time or forever, as long as eternity reigns on, makes it such that it gets easy after a certain point in time. It doesn't require as much effort to sustain the output or to sustain the activity. It has a longevity factor to it that pays dividends whenever you have a multitude of responsibilities. Then the other thing is, okay, because if you're highly introverted, I mean, like myself, you probably don't share what you do with other people, and that's another reason why you don't really have a hot plate under your ass about getting things done, because people honestly are only as dependable and as moral and ethically established as is their reputation to a certain extent. It's true that if you share something with another person, they're typically going to give you feedback about what you've shared with them, especially if you ask them to, and they're going to nag you about it. Now, if you're like me and you don't like to be nagged, then maybe you only tell one person or something like that. But tell people about your ventures and what you're trying to do and accomplish, and they'll hold you accountable, especially if you ask them to. That helps. That helps a lot. Especially for an INTP, because you're an extroverted feeler. You know damn well you care about what other people think about you to a certain extent. I mean, to a certain extent you don't, but you do know to a certain extent just how the environment treats you matters to you. And I'm telling you, if you want them to treat you in some way that you feel that you have some dignity and don't continually see blockades towards your advancements of the things that you truly do care about, you have to deal with some of the bureaucratic and stupid-ass administrative measures of the world. And so, make a routine and try and make a simple routine that you can keep up and just optimize the thing over time. Then tell people the things that you really want to get done about, and tell them that you really want to get them done so that they hold you accountable. Then 3, be consistent in your sleeping patterns. Like, holy crap, that's a very difficult thing for me. It's a very, very difficult thing for me. But, I mean, if you can start putting some constraints on yourself, then you'll find that your body just kind of dials in, and it becomes a well-oiled machine or well-tuned machine after a certain point. It's the process of instantiating habits, and you just need a few habits for anything that you're trying to do. For example, if you want to write something, make a habit of writing 30 minutes a day, if just that. I mean, if you're in school and you have to do homework, I do this, I just started doing this, but now I make it such that I work for 30 to 45 minutes at a time on something, and then take a 10-minute break for me to goof off or do whatever it is I want to do wherever my openness leads me. And then after 10 minutes, I get right back to it. And if I exhaust these 30 to 45 minute repetitions, usually for 3 to 4 sets of this, like in the sense that I do it 4 times. I mean, you'll get a lot of stuff done, because the power of focus. And if you are conscientious enough to do this, I try to do this, but it's really difficult for me to keep it consistent. Block out your days. Just make blocks of time so that you devote singular aspects of attention to one item at a time. and then make a day that you can just play, or you don't have to be obliged to anyone, because after a certain point, if you're like me, you're just going to begin to resent it. Then the other factor is this. The landscape of human motivation, according to self-determination theory, is predicated on the items of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And so, most people want to be self-directed to some degree whenever they're doing something. They also want to be competent. They also want to be competent at whatever it is they do, and they want the thing that they're competent at. They want to see the thing that they're competent at doing being something that can influence other people in any way that they see as meaningful or positive. If you do things in relation to those three criteria, it's easier. I mean, like, because I even try to do that stuff, but it becomes easy, and it doesn't always sustain your motivation, but it becomes easier to sustain it. And then also, I mean, whatever you do, I mean, whatever it is, like, there's a lot of things. Get to the point where you don't have to be motivated to do something. I mean, I'm not kidding when I say that. Most times, most things, I mean, like 90% of the things I do in a day's time, I'm never motivated to do them. I just do them. I legitimately just will myself to do them. I mean, you can't do that with all things, because after a certain point in time, you're going to burn yourself out and you're going to begin to resent the things that you do. I'm only saying this from my own experience. At least I know that happens with me. But you have to do it to a certain extent, because you're not always going to be able to calibrate it and get it right. And the more that it becomes a habit, the more that it becomes a routine, the easier it is to do and commit to said thing. And I suppose the final thing I'll say is take a vacation. Like, holy crap, take a vacation. Doesn't matter how long. Well, it does matter how long in terms of the amount of responsibility you have. But you know, if you're open, you don't like to work all the time. Even if you're super industrious like myself. I mean, you don't, like, I'm hyper industrious. Like, I'm in the 76th percentile for industriousness. So that's not hyper, but I'm more industrious than most people. But I don't like doing the same thing over and over again. I fucking hate that so much. Like, I don't like doing that. But you know, you at a certain point in time, you can work, but then you're going to have to stop and either don't work altogether or change direction and work on something different. Concede that. Just concede to that. Concede to your nature. Because that's another thing that, at least one thing I found with myself. I want to be, in some ways, whenever I'm trying to be successful, an ENTJ. The problem is I'm not. Like, that's the issue. And I can't work. I can't do that. I mean, or at least I can't work on the same thing. I have to work on one thing, then change, because I'll blow my brains out. Like, I'll blow my brains out after a certain point in time. And it doesn't mean that, and I used to think this means that you dislike the thing, or you don't love the thing, or whatever. But that's not the case. You just might be a very open person, and you just need to take time away from it. But it's okay. Take time away from things, but don't be lazy. I mean, is the bottom line. Yeah, so those are the things I've worked out rather recently, and honestly within the last 3 years, to deal with my lack of motivation in so many areas and facets of life. I mean, like, I deal with this stuff with whether I'm dealing with relationships, like people. I don't always like hanging out with people, but you know what? I pick a day, and this is the day I'm going to hang out with other people. And I call them up, and it's usually like every Friday or every Saturday. I hang out with the same group of people, or sometimes different groups of people. But I just hang out with the person, whatever. And it's literally like my job to do for that day. Then I'm going to do it, and I'm going to be done with it, and then I'll pick it up another Friday, and it becomes easier. And that's how, that's how I do it. And it's made my life, in some senses, much more equilibrated. But I still spend like about 96% of my time by myself working on something. But hey, that's how I like to live. But anyways, that's my video on how to better sustain motivation and eat. Holy crap! Just simply take care of yourself in the sense that you eat and you sleep. Because if you don't eat and you don't sleep, it's going to be rather hard for you to be motivated to do anything. Yeah. So with all that said, hope you enjoyed the video and you found it useful.